Alors, welcome to everybody in this International Women Days. It's a great pleasure for us to welcome you. OBVIA is launching a new series of conference under the theme, Let's Talk About AI and Digital EDI, that will bring together experts from various sectors and civil society to discuss and exchange on issues of equity, diversity and inclusion related to the development, deployment and use of AI and digital technology. Bienvenue à toutes et tous à cette première rencontre de la série Parlons EDI en intelligence artificielle et numérique, une initiative de l'OBVIA visant à réunir des spécialistes d'horizons divers pour venir échanger sur des enjeux d'équité, de diversité et d'inclusion en lien avec le développement, le déploiement et l'utilisation de l'intelligence artificielle et du numérique. Mon nom est Lise Langlois, je suis directrice générale de l'Observatoire. La table ronde aujourd'hui a été élaborée en collaboration avec Nadia Naffi. Nadia est titulaire de la chaire de leadership en enseignement sur les pratiques pédagogiques innovantes en contexte numérique, chaire financée par la Banque Nationale de l'Université Laval. Elle est aussi co-responsable de l'axe Éducation et capacitation à l'OBVIA. Je lui cède la parole pour qu'elle puisse nous présenter nos 4 femmes d'exception avec qui j'aurai la chance d'échanger sur la thématique retenue. Nadia.
Merci Lise, bonjour à toutes et à tous. Listen, I'm thrilled to introduce our brilliant guest. Nous avons avec nous 4 femmes exceptionnelles qui non seulement ont des parcours impressionnants, mais aussi qui ont à cœur la capacitation des filles et des femmes et travaillent fort pour s'assurer qu'elles prennent leur place légitime dans nos sociétés. Kate Arthur is the founder and CEO of Kids Code Journée, a national charity that has introduced computational thinking and coding to over 350,000 kids and across Canada. In 2019, Kids Code Journée launched #Kids2030, an initiative that will educate 1 million kids and 50,000 educators on artificial intelligence, ethics, and on using technology to achieve the UN Sustainable Development Global Goals by 2030. Nadia Bouin is Vice Provost Partnerships and Experiential Learning at Concordia University. She's Professor of Mechanical, Industrial, and Aerospace Engineering. She served as an Associate Director and Director of Education of the Concordia Institute of Aerospace Design and Innovation, and also was Director of the Master of Aerospace Engineering Program. Elizabeth Charles is a faculty researcher at Dawson College, Montreal, Quebec. She is the co-director of SALTIS, a community of practice that supports over 1,500 educators in their initiatives to develop active learning and technological innovation in studies of education. Elizabeth is also a visiting researcher with the Virtual Math Teams Project at Drexel University, Philadelphia. Et Anne-Louise Davidson est détentrice de la chaire de recherche en Culture Maker de l'Université Concordia. Elle est directrice du laboratoire d'innovation, elle est directrice adjointe de l'Institut Milieu pour l'art, la culture et la technologie et professeure agrégée en technologie éducative au département d'éducation à l'Université Concordia. Mesdames, un grand merci pour avoir accepté notre invitation. Lise, à toi.
Thank you, Nadia. So participants, I invite you to express yourselves and exchange in the discussion tools and to ask your question to the speaker in the Q&A tool throughout the meeting. You can write in French or in English, depending on your preference. I will share with our guests first, and I will have a moment at the end to take some question. Maybe our guests will answer the question in the Q&A, so it doesn't matter. So, bienvenue à tous. Vous pouvez poser vos questions aux intervenantes dans l'outil questions et réponses tout au long de la rencontre. Vous pouvez écrire en français ou en anglais selon votre préférence. Je vais d'abord échanger avec nos invités et nous garderons un moment à la fin pour prendre quelques questions. Il se peut aussi que nos intervenantes répondent déjà dans le questions et réponses à vos questions que vous avez demandées. Donc, sans plus tarder, nous allons commencer. First, I would like each of you to briefly share with us the image you have of the pedagogy of the future and what you think is problematic in current teaching practices for the full emancipation of girls and women. Maybe we can start with Kate.
Yeah, great. And thank you so much for having me here. So I look through the lens of little ones. So I focus on K to 12 year olds, and over the last 10 years plus, it's really been how do we engage girls and young women in the digital space, and making sure that both men and women are involved in creating with technology. So 10 years ago, when I walked into the classroom when one of my 3 daughters was going into the school system, I realized that this classroom was set up same way as it was 100 years ago, and we are no longer in the world of the 1900s. We are in an industrial, a digital revolution, the 4th wave we're here, and this needs to be reflected in the classroom. So I see the breakdown of walls, hands-on learning. We need strong female mentors and role models. We need a pedagogy that is engaging, that is impactful. Girls engage with technology when they know it's making a difference, when it does something. They don't build just to build, they build to create and do. So we really want to make sure that the classroom and the pedagogy from K to 12 is reflecting that. And it's also inviting and inclusive. So we're looking at how do we change the way that teachers are teaching? How do we make sure that there's representation in the maths and in the STEM skills at the higher ages as well, and that those in primary school, those teachers are also comfortable and able to invite math and technology into the classrooms. So that it is a very promising future. That is a lot that we need to do though, and it's not going to happen overnight. It's an ongoing effort. But it's hands-on learning and practice.
Thank you, Kate. Nadia.
Thank you, Lise, and excuse me, very happy to be here. I agree with everything that Kate said, of course, but I do think that there are quite a lot of problematic teaching practices that still persist in STEM field, really at all levels. To me, an education system is a place where we should be, fighting gender stereotypes, but today we still have textbooks, the curriculum, and even teachers that are all still contributing to keeping gender stereotypes alive. And we know that this has all kinds of effects on girls' lives, from what they want to study to their career choices and so on. To me, a major obstacle to an inclusive learning environment for girls is the shortage of female teachers. Kate alluded to this, and I'll just give you a quick anecdote. I've recounted this anecdote at another panel recently, so I apologize if some people have to hear this again twice. But to me, it's important, and it sheds light on how important female teachers and mentors are to girls. So many years ago, I was teaching a final year course to mechanical engineering and industrial engineering students. And my classes are very interactive. So I ask a lot of questions and we discuss a lot. And after 2 or 3 classes, at the end of one of my classes, I went to the bathroom, and there was a female student that was crying. And so I asked her what was wrong, and she was a mechanical engineering student. I teach industrial engineering mostly, and many of the girls in the class were industrial engineering. And she told me, she said, all the students, the girls in industrial engineering, they seem confident, they're asking questions, they're answering questions. And she was just mortified to even speak out. So she asked some of her friends in industrial engineering how they got to be that way. And what they told her was that on the very first day at university, in the very first engineering class that they walked into was me, a female engineering professor, a woman of color, and they never felt like they were out of place during the duration of their program. And this student, who was in her 4th year, her final semester, it was the first time she had a female professor, and on top of it, a minority. She was a Black student. And she was really upset that she never had me or any other female professor sooner. And she said she always felt out of place in a male-dominated environment. And here she is about to graduate and go into another male-dominated environment, the world of work, feeling this way. So all that to say that we should not underestimate how important it is to have female mentors for our young female students at all stages. In STEM fields especially, there are not enough female teachers, there are not enough role models, there are not enough mentors, and university is not the place to start giving them this type of exposure. It really needs to start very early in the lives of young girls.
And maybe also to show the women who succeed in this field can help.
Absolutely, yeah, fully agree.
Yeah. Elizabeth, what do you think?
Wow. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me. And what's been said so far by Kate and Nadia are so poignant, and particularly your comments, Nadia, because my research has come in from the point of view of active learning or pedagogical innovations that increase student-centered types of pedagogy. And what Nadia is describing, I would characterize as what active learning does is it gives students a voice. It promotes the notion of working together. It promotes the notions of collaboration and putting authentic problems that students can contribute to. It's in addition to that, one of the important things that active learning is showing is that it is particularly useful for students who are underrepresented in STEM, which is women, people of color, people who have traditionally not been invited into STEM or have been kept out of STEM. And some of the reasons is this notion of giving a voice, giving a sense of ownership of what is being learned, and that notion that when you can contribute, your contributions can be validated. This is it's really wonderful to hear your anecdote, Nadia. I think it's an important one for us to consider on this Women's Day.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And Louise.
Mais merci de m'avoir invité. C'est toujours plaisant de participer à des conversations comme ça. Et surtout dans le contexte de la question que vous nous posez, à savoir qu'est-ce qui ne va pas dans le système éducatif. Il y a tellement de choses qui ne vont pas bien. Une espèce de surfocus sur des curricula qui sont désuets, une espèce de division du temps de l'enseignement qui finalement est artificielle, une division des matières aussi qui est très artificielle parce qu'il n'y a rien comme ça. Il n'y a rien qui fonctionne dans la vie qui est une division des matières comme on la présente à l'école. Et il y a un surfocus aussi sur le travail théorique, le travail qui passe par l'écrit, et pas assez qui passe par le travail qui implique le corps et qui implique les mains. Et très souvent, ce qu'on voit, c'est que l'éducation qu'on donne aux gars par rapport aux hommes, par rapport à la pratique matérielle, s'engager dans une pratique qui est manuelle, l'apprentissage qui passe par le corps, qui passe par les mains, et pas le même que celui qu'on donne aux filles. Et puis ça date de très longtemps. Si je me rappelle, dans les années 80, alors que j'avais un cours optionnel qui était économie domestique, où j'apprenais à faire de la cuisine et puis coudre. Et puis les gars pouvaient faire le travail de bois pour devenir charpentier. Et moi, j'ai fait toute une histoire à ce moment-là pour apprendre à travailler le bois, parce que de toute façon, apprendre à coudre, j'ai fait ça avec ma grand-mère. Apprendre à faire la cuisine, j'ai fait ça avec toutes les femmes dans ma famille. Et puis apprendre à travailler le bois, j'ai jamais fait ça. Et puis c'est quelque chose que je voulais vraiment faire. Donc il y a vraiment quelque chose à dire par rapport à ça. Il y a aussi le fait que On a tout un système qui est très, très orienté, division scolaire. Quand il y a un projet interdisciplinaire, c'est très, très limité par rapport à l'accompagnement qu'on peut donner. Et on a tout le mouvement maker dans les écoles qui est en train de prendre une envolée avec la création des espaces maker, la création des Fab Labs dans les écoles. Et on voit très bien que les jeunes filles n'ont pas de problème à rentrer dans ces espaces-là. Puis à un moment donné, quand on arrive au secondaire, elles sont craintives. Et puis c'est équivalent avec la perte d'intérêt pour les sciences thèmes. Vers la fin du secondaire, les filles commencent à descendre en termes de population dans les classes qui s'intéressent à ces matières-là. Donc, il y a vraiment quelque chose à dire par rapport à ça. Et puis si on pense aussi à qu'est-ce qu'on peut apprendre par le passage d'une pratique matérielle qui passe par le corps et par les mains, c'est toute la pensée critique qui rentre en jeu, le travail collaboratif, le leadership qui se développe par rapport à ça, et en même temps, toute la question de la conscience sociale. Donc, je pense qu'il y a vraiment un manquement par rapport à la conscientisation qu'il faut faire aux filles par rapport à ça.
Comment vous expliquez le côté craintif? How do you explain that the girl in the high school, when they arrive in high school, they are we can translate craintif. I don't remember this word.
So how do I explain to the girls that arrive in high school and engage less into material practice?
Yes, engage less. Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's a strange phenomenon. When kids are born, you know, whether they're male or female or in between, it doesn't matter. They throw themselves into material practice because play is around, you know, moving things with the body, and that's how they develop agency. The more girls age, the more they are told not to get their hands dirty, the more they are told that, you know, they have to act like girls. And obviously there is more and more fear that is brought in terms of, you know, taking risks. And, you know, I've had long conversations with girls about, you know, taking a power saw or a drill. You know, the fear of manipulating the tool at one point becomes you know, overpowering in the relation to material practice, and they prefer to let the guys handle the tools, and then they just, you know, move on to the design or the planning of activities, and that has to be sliced at one point. I mean, it's unnecessary, and it's a lack in the education, because being able to exercise agency on your environment is fundamentally human.
Okay, thank you. So thank you for this warm-up, and we will ask another question. Do culturally different ways of learning and teaching benefit some populations more than others? If so, is this equity? Kate?
Yeah, great question. And you know, I was raised and educated in a number of different countries where I was the minority. So I was raised in Nigeria and Argentina and Saudi Arabia, and I'm one of 4 daughters in the family who were raised in many different areas and situations, and also coming from an engineering family dominated by male engineers in our house. And so we were brought up in a very inclusive environment. So we accepted that we were able to do anything basically, but it was clear that that was very unique in our family, and in the countries that I was raised in. I only realized this when I hit my teenage years, when I really entered into the high school. And as Anne-Louise was mentioning, that age in high school is very challenging. I think for young women as well, it's very much about who your mentors are and who your teachers are, to allow for an inclusive environment for you to be able to do anything. You know, I have a daughter in robotics, and as many do, and it's very challenging to find other girls who are in robotics and who are led by a robotics teacher who is a female or is able to be inclusive in the female, the way that that's inclusive for everyone in the room. So I do see a lot of differences in the culture. I think from the family, education is not just the responsibility of a school system, it's the responsibility of a community. So that's whether it's a community centers, Girl Guides, Boy Scouts, your parents, those differences are very apparent. Today, I see books that I look at through an international lens now as well. And even if you look at the AI researchers and a lot of people in the AI space now, a lot are women, and a lot of them are Eastern European, Chinese, those cultures where in Eastern Europe, math is not a boys' subject. It is a subject that everyone does, that it is not separated by the sexes. And given math is so prominent in technology now and the importance of it, we're seeing that now in those people who are taking the space in artificial intelligence and the development of that, which is great to see. China as well, that their math system, their education systems at a very young age is very inclusive to mathematics for everyone, and it doesn't separate. The other thing I see as a challenge that we do here in North America and Western is we separate the arts and sciences. And in fact, that's where innovation really happens, is when the two are together. And so those cultures that bring those two together allow for real, a holistic space of learning and different entry points to learning, and not separating it. And to what Anne-Louise was saying as well, like the subjects, we don't live in a math world. We live in a world that has part of it is math, and part of it is history, and part of it is geography. And we should be seeing that in the classroom, so that all different aspects of a child's learning is including these different parameters, and not just these siloed subject matters, which don't live, they live independently.
Yes, right. Elizabeth?
Yes, so to go back to your question about, is it beneficial, I believe, to some, is it equity?
Population. Yes.
Yeah.
Is it the learning and teaching benefits some populations more than others? If so, is it the equity? Can we talk about equity?
Yeah, so, it's such a fascinating question, and it's one that that does occupy some of my thinking as I try to imagine some of the challenges that are faced by not just women, but women of color. Obviously, that's an important population for me. And I don't have a good answer for your question, because I'm not sure how we get that balance. I don't think it's like affirmative action. It was a policy that aimed to try to bring some level of equity, but in doing so, it clearly disadvantaged some individuals so that others could rise up. And I think that that's an important thing to consider, is how do we get that balance? How do we get that sense of these many voices that are really important as we try to think of new pedagogies that allow cultural diversity to enter into the conversation that has to happen, that is real learning. And I think Kate's point about things cannot be separated by discipline. They should be considered as whole complex problems. That is one of the things that I think is a very important step that has been taken when it comes to active learning pedagogies, things like problem-based learning, project-based learning. Those have tried to incorporate multiple aspects of what a problem is, and therefore you can bring in these different kinds of characteristics of and different parts of the solution that has to come together. But just to return for a moment before I stop to this notion of equity, and how do we bring our minds around this, I've been thinking more and more and talking to more and more people about what are co-design, how do we bring equity? Well, we need to include voices. How do we include voices in a legitimate, and not only legitimate, but also in a respectful way? That to me is the big challenge of the 21st century. How do we create this kind of true designing instruction, designing whatever, with these multiple voices and giving them each a space. And that to me is how, we need to move forward.
Like Janet said in the chat, is equity still giving the same response to everyone, or is it to adapt the response to the gift of each and everyone? Sometimes we would like to adapt, but the system, we cannot, because the system do not permit to do this adaptation. So, Anne-Louise, your turn.
Merci, Lise. Je pense que j'aimerais faire un pas en arrière et puis juste mentionner que quand on parle de femmes et éducation et de capacitation, il faut vraiment traiter le sujet d'une perspective internationale. Parce que l'éducation qu'on donne aux femmes en Amérique du Nord, en Europe, dans les pays de l'OCDE, est très différente de l'éducation qu'on donne aux femmes dans d'autres pays. Lorsqu'on parle de capacitation et d'éducation, c'est pas facile d'imaginer ce qu'est l'éducation d'une fille, par exemple, ou d'une femme dans un pays comme la Mauritanie ou l'Afghanistan d'aujourd'hui, ou il y a quelques semaines, si on veut. Dans certains pays d'Afrique, le fait d'offrir, par exemple, du microfinancement aux femmes qui veulent partir leur entreprise crée des problèmes de couple, de divorce, leur font perdre leur enfant, leur famille, même les fait chasser du village. Et puis, tout ça, ça vient beaucoup des statistiques qu'on regarde. Par exemple, si on regarde les taux de fertilité. En 1962, à travers le monde, le taux de fertilité des femmes était de 5 enfants. Aujourd'hui, à travers le monde, on parle de 2,4 enfants. Quand on parle du Canada, dans les 6 dernières décennies, on est passé de 4 enfants à 1,4 enfants. Quand on regarde la cause de ça, souvent, c'est expliqué comme étant la cause étant l'éducation. Parce que c'est des corrélations qui sont faites et puis les gens interprètent des corrélations comme étant des relations de cause à effet. Donc, on dit, l'éducation des femmes, c'est problématique. Plus les femmes sont éduquées, moins ils ont d'enfants. Alors, on va blâmer l'éducation des femmes. Et puis là, on commence à mettre des limites sur ça. Donc, en fait, on pourrait aussi dire que, par exemple, plus une femme est éduquée, mais si on regarde, par exemple, la population mondiale, elle n'arrête pas de monter de façon exponentielle. Alors, c'est pas parce que le taux de fertilité descend qu'on a un problème de population sur la Terre. Il faut se le dire. Mais on peut aussi dire que, par exemple, plus les femmes sont éduquées, mieux elles savent prendre soin de leurs enfants, meilleures sont les conditions de vie, etc. Donc, c'est pas lu de cette façon-là. Donc, ce qui arrive, c'est qu'on se dit... on va donner on va réduire, par exemple, les opportunités d'éducation aux femmes dans certains pays, dans certaines matières, dans certaines disciplines, pour éviter ce genre de problème-là. Puis on se retrouve avec des grands écarts conceptuels. Entre autres, femmes égale tout ce qui est femmes et filles, qui s'identifient en tant que femmes et filles et qui peut faire une scolarisation qui est au moins obligatoire. Quand on parle de s'identifier comme femme aussi, on peut aussi parler de relations sociales construites sur des structures de pouvoir et d'hégémonie qui ne sont pas partagées et qui peuvent se comprendre en tant que conscientisation, c'est-à-dire pourquoi est-ce qu'une personne qui est femme ou qui s'identifie comme femme n'a pas le droit d'avoir la même scolarisation qu'un homme. Il y a aussi énormément d'identités qui sont mouvantes, donc se construire des nouveaux narratifs pour se construire en tant que déconstruction d'identité. C'est-à-dire que, en quoi est-ce que le fait d'appartenir à la moitié de l'humanité qui s'identifie comme femme a un impact sur l'éducation en 2022? Et c'est encore une question dans certains pays où on se dit « Ah non, toi, tu es une fille, tu n'as pas le droit d'être ingénieur, il faudrait plus que tu sois comme une designer. Toi, tu es une fille, alors il ne faudrait pas que tu sois un médecin, il faudrait que tu sois une infirmière. » Et puis, il y a toujours cet aspect-là où tu vois dans un film, une femme qui rentre et puis qui est le médecin dans la place, et puis quelqu'un dit « Ah, moi je veux parler avec un médecin, je veux pas parler avec l'infirmière », alors que c'est elle qui est le médecin, elle a le stéthoscope dans son cou. Donc, il y a énormément de disparités en termes de construction d'identité, en termes de ce qu'on applique de façon internationale en tant que principe. Et puis on est très, très conscient ici au Canada, en Amérique du Nord, dans les pays de l'OCDE, en Europe, des inéquités qui peuvent exister. Mais il faut vraiment appliquer, je pense, notre pensée sur un plus grand spectrum et puis voir qu'est-ce qui est encore affecté aujourd'hui et puis comment est-ce qu'on peut intervenir en termes de donner l'égalité des chances et puis créer des situations qui peuvent améliorer l'équité. Je vais arrêter ici.
Merci, Anne-Louise. Nadia?
Yeah, thank you. This is, I found an interesting question, and I guess I'll approach it in a more generic way. I mean, to me, cultures differ in the way, in how they believe that people learn, right? So the educational patterns will reflect these beliefs and values. And within different learning environments, there's often a dominant culture that will influence the course content that's chosen, the teaching methods, and a number of other aspects of the learning environment. So for example, there are some cultures that believe that people learn best by discovering new ideas for themselves. And these cultures will encourage learners to question and to analyze what they're taught, to explore and to experiment with ideas. So North American and Australian classrooms, or many European countries, for example, student participation and speaking up in class is important. And this is going to often result in confident graduates that thrive in a variety of situations. Other cultures, many Asian cultures, for example, believe that students should accept what they're being taught without question, and that's the best way to learn. And so the learners will tend to be more quiet, very disciplined, very hardworking, respectful, and really good at memorizing. And these graduates will tend to work really hard and do well, but they might not necessarily thrive in diverse social settings. And on the question of equity, for me, equity will recognize the individual needs that every student has, and then we'll present them with an educational process or a pathway that will allow for their own personal success, while the school system has sort of like a particular cultural basis that will provide a framework for the learning. And so sometimes, depending on the dominant culture that will prevail in teaching and learning, the individual needs of the learner aren't necessarily going to be recognized and aren't necessarily going to be optimized. So, and then on the question of whether it's good or bad, or whether there are benefits or not. So whether you consider that a dominant culture is good or bad in a learning environment, and whether culturally different ways of teaching and learning benefit some population more than others, I think will depend on whether you share or reject the underlying values or beliefs of that particular dominant culture.
Yes, thank you, Nadia. Sorry. I thought I closed my phone, sorry. I would like to continue, but about more the studies that we can have. Many studies around the world tend to show that even today, only 20% of STEAM-related jobs are held by women. We know that several factors can explain this situation. In your opinion, why is it important to aim for a better gender balance? How can educational innovation contribute to this? And what would be the benefits for AI and digital technology? I will start with Anne-Louise.
Okay, well, let me start with the end. It is not possible today to work in most fields without having some form of competency to be able to operate, control, thrive through digital technology. And if a field has not been touched by AI so far, and I can think of maybe aesthetics, hairdressing, maybe, if they're not exploiting chatbots to serve their clients. If a field has not been touched by AI or digital transformation, it will be touched by it. And keeping girls away from, or women away from those technologies is actually harming them. Now, if I backtrack on this and I look at, the push from STEM to STEAM in schools and in universities as well, where we're starting to integrate the arts into the STEM sciences, and we start to also provide some entrepreneurship design education. We're starting to look also at, how can social scientists be less dubious about the technology. I mean, their job is to be dubious, and it's to criticize and to speculate how horrible these technologies are, and that's fine. But it doesn't serve any purpose in the job place where people have to deal with these, and rather than accept the fact that they are pervasive, simply ignore them. So that's the danger. So if we backtrack on this and we say, in the future, everybody's in education towards this. Most of the people who land in social sciences and arts, a lot of them are girls, women, and they need an education to be at least developing an awareness, a critical reflection, a capacity to also to critically act on those technologies and those scenarios that will present to them.
Okay, thank you. Nadia?
Yeah, so I believe gender diversity matters a lot in AI because without it, it puts women at a disadvantage. It can be very unsafe for women in many cases. And also it just limits our access to so many things, right? So I can give you, there are probably many examples out there that people know about, but Amazon, for example, had developed a new recruiting engine that was biased against women. It was meant to review a large number of resumes and then shortlist the best ones. And what it ended up doing was penalizing women in the way it scored and in a number of different ways, so that the female CVs didn't score as highly as men. So this is putting women at a disadvantage. It's also a question of safety. And there's this well-known examples of seat belts and airbags in cars, which were designed mainly based on data on the male body, and women's bodies didn't fit into these standard measurements. So we were 47% more likely to have an injury, and I think something like 17% more likely to die than a man in a similar accident. And women make up half the population, but our needs aren't always met because these AI products and services are designed and tested generally by men for men. And so gender biases and stereotypes are being reproduced in these products and services. This bias, obviously, it's been around for a long time. It's not a recent phenomenon, but to increase gender diversity in AI, again, I think we need to focus on changes in the education system. And Kate had mentioned this earlier, is, we need to provide much more access to digital education, so more STEM subjects and more access to digital infrastructure for girls starting all the way in elementary school. We need to increase access to the acquisition of digital skills and competencies for girls and for women. We need to make sure that we have unbiased content that's developed and that teaching materials are also gender equitable. And of course, teachers have to be trained, right? That's critical. And then when it comes to AI products that females are going to use, females need to be included, young girls, older, they need to be included in the co-creation and the design and the testing of AI products and services so that more female users can actually have access to them and will actually engage more with digital solutions and digital technologies. And I think if we don't address these sorts of things, the gender digital divide is just going to keep on getting wider.
Yes, yeah, we're right. Elizabeth?
What's been said so far, is absolutely right on the money. I think, one of my biggest fears about going forward with things like AI has always been that sense of who is informing the AI, because if we don't have the kind of diversity of, again, going back to this notion of, the voices, like who's there around the table, clearly there are a lot of biases that are built into into what is expected for artificial intelligence to make decisions. And that goes very, very strongly for people of color, where a lot of what Nadia's been describing, a lot of it can also be could be reflected in designs for or medical solutions. How are they tested, and how frequently the populations that are tested on are reflecting the kinds of needs of these populations. So I think I'd like to sort of echo a few of the things that we've talked about a little bit before, and I think Anne-Louise mentioned identity a lot and agency, and I think that to me is where the solution of education comes in, and innovative pedagogies come in, is promoting these kinds of digital careers, or careers in digital technologies and STEM, as something that women see themselves as model, that there are good models, that we can, role models and models that we can build from, and promote those. But there's also something that we haven't touched on a little, and I'd like to maybe just mention it briefly, is a lot of the knowledge that we currently have has already been formed by these structures, these cultural structures that we have to be sensitive to. And I think we need to recognize what those structural constraints are, and how they may be shaping the women who are in fields that are role models, and how maybe we need to help those people reframe their thinking about what their role is as a model. And I'll give you a very, very quick anecdote. I remember when I was when I was about to get my PhD, the convocation of my PhD, it so happened it was the exact same day as my daughter's graduation from high school. And so my dilemma was, do I go to my daughter's graduation or my own? And I said to myself, my daughter's was more important. I'd been to graduation convocations before. And I ran into someone, a Black man who worked, I graduated from Concordia. So I ran into this Black man who worked at Concordia, and I said to him, and he knew about me, and he said, so I'm looking forward to your your convocation. And I said, I don't think I'm going to go. And I explained to him, and he said, you must go. And I said, but why? He says, you have to be there as a model, as a role model. And I never had thought about myself as a role model. And I think that may be what I'm trying to say, is that, the women who are the role models need to know that they're role models, and therefore use that as a way to support women girls and women moving forward. Sort of much like what Nadia was saying about, your vignette of the women in the washroom. I think that has to be part of our psyche, and it has to be it's structurally that we don't think of ourselves in those ways, and we have to change that, and it has to be intentional.
Is it a lack of confidence, Elizabeth?
I don't think so. Well, maybe in some cases, yes, but I think it's also you don't see what you've done as special. You just think that this is who you do. Yeah. And sort of what Kate was saying is, I think earlier, you just, because you have achieved things, you just thought they were normal. It was part of your structure, but you don't realize that it's not everyone has the same reality that you have. And I think it's making us understand that the reality is that our situation is not normal. We are, we have to be aware of how we can help others recognize the things that we've done, but not in a, not in a self-enriching way, but more trying to help people understand how they can move forward.
Thank you. Kate.
Oh my gosh, my brain is just
yes,
it's so rich. Jumping into what everyone's saying, because it's just everything that has been said is touching me really closely, and I don't want to repeat what's been said because it's been said so eloquently, but I just to add on and to focus on a little bit on the 20%, and to remind some of the what we've been discussing is, I mean, the 20% is because we focus on the year before and not long term. We really need to start when these kids are 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, when we're shaping what is acceptable. Every kid loves to learn. Every kid is curious. Every kid is ready to absorb. And as society, they go through society, we build in these blocks and these lenses that are put in place. So one of the joys in my job is to be able to always look through the lens of a 7-year-old, and it is wonderful, it is bright, and it is always curious. And I think we need to be always conscious of making sure we're listening to that and allowing them to find their space and place. And those barriers are, you know, they go into high school and they hit another bunch of challenges. And if they don't have the role models and the teachers and the structure to pull them up, we separate boys and girls in places where, I know there's research on both sides, but boys need to learn how to accept women, how to encourage women, how to, you know, to believe that we can all be in this space together, not push them down, not keep them out of spaces. And when we go into the high school, the university setting, again, another challenge is we're not teaching them to work in teams properly. The communication skills are lacking. You know, then they go into the workforce, women are excluded there. I mean, the challenges are on. And again, that importance of, Elizabeth, to the role model, what you've done is you've done it, but it's so important for us to always be there to pull each other up, and both men and women to support that. For the space in the AI, the development and deployment of artificial intelligence without the lens of a diverse team, both building that, testing it and training it, and then using it and contributing the data, we are doing a disservice to society and to these technologies that are being built. I think that there's a conception that AI is bad. AI is neither good or bad. It's what we do with it and how we build it at this, you know, it's been around for decades, but we're really at a critical point of early structure where the data that we're feeding these powerful machines, we can start building that ethical lens and that diversity. And I think we're also privileged here in Montreal to have, you know, the organizations that put this team together here, this event today. We have CFAR, we have the Montreal Declaration of Responsible AI. I mean, we really have a nugget in Montreal as a role model for the rest of the world. I mean, we should be really benefiting from the work that those teams are doing, and sharing that within the education systems, and making sure that both from the 6-year-olds to the 26-year-olds in their education systems are understanding that powerful technology.
Thank you, Kate. The last question now for this afternoon. I would like to share, sorry, would you like to share a personal story about your student or professional career? How did this experience influence your passion for innovation in education or your desire to help the next generation? I would like to hear you. I will start with Nadia.
So like a story that inspired us to, I think-
to influence your career or your education.
Well, it's funny. I came to this realization not too long ago, a couple of years ago. People often ask me, you know, why did you pick engineering? And most of my life, I used to say, you know what, I always loved the arts and I wanted to go into the arts. But back then we were always told, you know, you're going to be a starving artist and so on. So all my life I've been saying, you know what, I picked engineering out of a hat because I didn't want to be a starving artist. And, you know, I decided I should just pick something practical and, you know, I'll end up getting a job, you know, not because I was interested in engineering or I knew very much about it. But people used to say, well, you have 2 engineers in your family, your dad, your brother, they're both engineers. Did that have anything to do with it? And I used to always say, no, it didn't. And then I realized really literally a couple of years ago how silly that was of me, because if I didn't have engineers in my family, maybe I never would even have thought about engineering. So clearly that had an impact on me. I might have, you know, picked accounting or something completely different. So that was just like a moment where I realized, you know, if you are exposed to if you're exposed to everything, then you're going to pick something because you know about it. If you're not exposed to it, which so many girls are not exposed to these STEM type careers and STEM type subjects when they're young, boys are, girls are not, they won't even think about it. So that was a big lesson to me. And that was clear that, you know, we need to expose not just STEM, but we need to expose girls and boys to many different subjects. And then at least they know about it and then they can pick things that sort of resonate with them. So I think that's the story I can share.
Yes. And you, Kate?
Yeah, I've had one aha moment in my recollection, in my memories, and it was when I started Kids Co Jeunesse. And I studied English literature, and I've worked in communications prior to starting this for many years. Power of the written word and the word has always been almighty to me. And when I saw my first few lines of code, my husband's an IT consultant, I actually looked at it and read it. And when I read code, I really understood the power of code as a form of communication. And if you look at back to the history of literature and literacy and the power of the white man dominating that communication, whether it was the monks or the elite in the 16th centuries, and to today, who's building and creating the powerful technologies that we use to communicate, the Facebooks and TikToks and Amazons of the world, it was the same. And I just thought, my gosh, we are in trouble if we don't fix this and make sure that everyone has the power to understand coding, to be digital skills literate. So that was my aha moment.
Anne-Louise, quel a été ton personnel moment?
C'est drôle parce que quand les gens me demandent comme qu'est-ce que tu es, je sais même pas comment expliquer parce que je sors de partout. J'ai pas vraiment une carrière qui est autre qu'une carrière multidisciplinaire. Et puis c'est dur d'expliquer le parcours parce que c'est tellement jonché d'exceptions. À partir d'un baccalauréat en littérature française et puis en beaux-arts, un baccalauréat en éducation, une maîtrise en administration, un doctorat en psychopédagogie, un post-doctorat en anthropologie, en sociologie, et puis ensuite tout un parcours en technologie éducative où j'ai fait de l'apprentissage en ligne, de l'enseignement en ligne, de la réalité virtuelle, de la réalité augmentée, de la culture maker, et puis là maintenant, mon nouveau parcours en termes de pédagogie de l'innovation. J'arrive pas trop à expliquer qui je suis, mais ce que je peux dire, c'est que pour moi, une personne qui est capable de travailler à externaliser sa pensée, c'est magique, d'une part. En tant qu'artiste, quand je regardais, en fait, moi, quand je dessine, je vois la couleur s'étendre sur le papier. Je trouve tellement que c'est beau, le pigment qui s'absorbe sur le papier. Il y a quelque chose de magique là-dedans. Quand je bâtis une imprimante 3D, puis je vois les premières petits bouts de polylactic acid qui sortent de la buse d'impression 3D, puis je regarde ça, puis à un moment donné, j'arrive à faire coller l'objet, puis ça se construit. Pour moi, il y a une magie là-dedans. Alors, ce que je peux vous dire, c'est sans doute le commentaire le plus cliché en éducation, c'est partager sa passion pour quelque chose qui est vraiment magique. Donc, pas partager ma passion pour ma matière, mais plutôt pour le magique. Et puis, quand je passe avec des générations de filles et de femmes qui passent dans le makerspace, dans le laboratoire d'innovation, et que je suis capable de construire leur identité à partir d'une pratique matérielle, pour moi, ça, c'est ce qui est le plus beau. Je parle de filles, par exemple, qui sortent, par exemple, je sais pas moi, de baccalauréat en finance, qui voulaient pas vraiment étudier en finance, qui voulaient étudier en engineering, qui n'ont pas été admises, qui se disent « mais moi, j'ai pas d'identité trop forte là-dessus », et puis je leur fais organiser un événement sur une journée Arduino où elles vont avoir 8 mois pour s'outiller, développer la capacité d'empowerment, de créer leur réseau, de parler à plein de monde, de créer un projet, d'organiser un workshop. Et puis tout d'un coup, c'est elle qui gère la journée et puis qui devient complètement autre et puis qui... C'est comme une espèce de, je sais pas moi, comme un genre de fleurissement qui existe chez une personne parce qu'elle a passé à travers plein d'expériences. Pour moi, ça, c'est des moments très précieux en éducation. Et puis, si je peux faire la répétition, je vais le faire à répétition. Là. Donc, autant d'histoires comme ça qu'on peut accumuler, le mieux que c'est.
Merci Anne-Louise de partager ta passion. Elisabeth, it's you, the last word.
Now, what an interesting question, Lise. You know, I am listening to the others describe you know, that, you know, their answers. My mind's gone in many directions. You know, I have, you know, sort of similar to some of the statements. Unlike Nadia, I've not been, my path hasn't been straight. I think it's more like Anne-Louise's, perhaps. You know, going from a bachelor's in history to photography, to education technology, to learning sciences, sort of rolling forward with discovering myself, I guess. But it also made me think about where I got my passion for innovation. And that comes from my family, from my father. I was always surrounded by, he was a doctor, but he was also a very, more of a Renaissance man and an engineer. Surprised, you know, his mind was that of an engineer, and loved innovation, loved creating. And I think that more than anything else has driven me in terms of what I see the world as. I embrace innovation readily. I find it I find it strange when people are afraid of change. And I guess it really does come from the sense of who you are early on, probably. You know, no, unlike or similar to Kate, probably. When you mentioned, you know, you talked about not feeling particularly, you know, that you're, you know, that there was any stereotyping. I never thought about it as being unusual, but my father had no bounds of what he imagined us to be and be able to do. And there wasn't a sense of stereotyping in our household. In fact, if anything, I think my father had great plans for my sister and I, in terms of, you know, like you should be able to do anything you wanted to do. So, you know, I guess that's, you know, I guess that sense of identity and encouragement, which is we take for granted, and yet it's so powerful. So I don't know if I'm rambling on now, but thank you very much for asking the question, because I hadn't thought about it. And lastly, I just wanted to say, there have been people, I think teachers are so important in our lives because they do give us a sense of identity. And we don't even know when and why someone's given you a sense of identity. And I can remember again, you know, in hearing, you know, the other people talk and reflecting as they were talking, I know that there were several really critical teachers in my life who said very small things, nothing, you know, I mean, if it probably didn't even cross their minds that they were encouraging me, but they encouraged me and they challenged me in some cases. You know, it's that sense of, you know, not being afraid to be challenged, which to me really made a difference, and not talking down to me or giving me or lowering expectations for me. I guess that was what they were trying to do. And you know, one of them is, you know, someone that Anne-Louise knows really well, which is Gary Boyd, you know, our formal, you know, one of our teachers who made a huge impression on me. And again, that sense of being aware of not being afraid of innovation.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, everybody. What a great panel. What a great celebration for this day today, the International Women's Days. It's a gift. You know, I can see that it was a gift for the lunchtime. And I can see, I didn't read all the comments, but almost. And I can see it's very, very positive. So, merci, mesdames, pour ce merveilleux échange. Je pense que Nadia et moi, on est ravis de cette rencontre, de cette conversation. Ça a beaucoup touché les gens. Hein, Nadia, je ne sais pas si tu as dû prendre le temps de lire. C'était des femmes extraordinaires. Et c'est une façon à nous de vous mettre en valeur à l'OBVIA. On trouve ça important de donner la voix à ces femmes pour que, comme Nadia l'a dit, Kate, Elisabeth et Anne-Louise, que ça participe à des modèles forts de femmes qui vont aider d'autres femmes et hommes à se joindre à ce projet d'équité, d'égalité, d'équité, d'inclusion dans la diversité. Je trouve que c'est un point important. Thank you, everybody, to be with us this afternoon. Merci encore, Nadia, d'avoir organisé ce panel.